Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Hey everybody, in this episode I want to recap a couple of sessions that I participated in, one that I ran and one that I played in. Neither of these are my old school essentials games. One is the second Dungeon Crawl Classics, in which I'm a player, and I think it's about time for me to talk about my 5e game. So it will contain some spoilers for a few of the published Wizards of the Coast 5e modules, but I'll let you know when I get to that segment. If you feel like you're going to play in those modules or are playing in them, you can skip that section so that you don't get exposed to any spoilers that would ruin the fun. Anyway, but first we've got some calls to get into. This first set of calls is regarding the last session recap for my Old School Essentials game. So we've got a call from Jason of Nerds RPG Variety Cast and a couple from Daniel Norton of Bandits Keep. So here we go.
So, BJ, I have a question. How long did that session take? Great session recap. Sounds like you have great players, and it's a wonderful game. And it's, enhanced by the fact you spent the time setting up the world for us. But, yeah, about how long did that session take? I'm just curious. Not that it really matters, just, idle curiosity. Anyhow, great episode, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.
Hey, Jason. That session, I think, ran about 4 hours. We normally play about 3 hours. I think we went about an hour over on that one. Just because there was so much going on, and I think everybody could feel we were about at the resolution of maybe the first real dungeon crawl that they had really done and gotten into. So we kind of wanted to end on that note. Everybody could sense they were getting close to leveling up and things like that. So yeah, that normally our sessions are about 3 hours. That one ran 4 just because there was a whole lot going on, and we play on Friday nights, so most people were able to stick around until we got it done. So yeah, thanks for the call. And I'm glad you enjoyed the session recaps. I hope you enjoy the ones coming up in the future, and we'll keep following along. And hopefully as you alluded, my setting up of the world for people who listen to the podcast so they understand what's going on in context of the lore and what all's happening. I hope I keep making that clear, and I'm having fun doing it. So thanks for listening.
Hey BJ, Daniel from Bandits Keep calling in. I'm just starting to listen to your recap, but that's pretty cool that you're going by the kind of the order of operations. I'm curious how it'll play out and if you'll like it in the end. It took me a while to get back into using it, and now I use it all the time. I actually think it separates combat a little bit, but I always feel like combat gets stopped anyways, so it's not like, unless you're playing something like Dungeon World, it's not, combat is a different thing. It's still role-playing, but it's a different kind of thing, so I don't mind the kind of, this is where I'm going to do moves. And also, like I said, it does open up the option for spell disruption, which can suck if you're the player, but can be awesome if you're the player and you disrupt the other side. Oh wow, that was an awesome recap. That sounded like an amazing session. All kinds of, I love when the players get into role-playing about, more moral issues and stuff. I also, speaking of morale is such a great thing in VX, right? I love that they're retreating back and running and stuff, and I love that you're using those rules. It really is highlighting how just great, in my opinion, of course, because I love maybe some VX, how great VX is. It's such a great system. It just creates interesting things with the morale and now you're using the spell interrupting. That worked out well. So yeah, that sounded like an amazing session.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. It was a lot of fun. And like I'd mentioned in my response to Jason, a whole lot happened. We ran about an hour over than we normally would play. But yeah, I think I was a little rusty at adjudicating those rules, and I had abandoned. I'd gotten in the habit of keeping everybody in a sort of default initiative order, basically their marching order basically their marching order. So even when they were in initiative, I would say whoever was kind of first in the marching order when this started, what do you do in terms of declaring actions and then going through that. So I kind of started just doing it visually in the map, like going kind of clockwise, and I think that confused some of the players. So I think if I go back to keeping people in their initiative order, or their marching order, in and out of combat, I think it'll go much smoother. The players kind of gave me some feedback on that in the days following the session, that would have gone smoother, and then it would have paired that with following the order of operations, and maybe we finally got our got everything down pat the way we want it to be. So I'm enjoying BX, and I thank you for the encouragement and for all the advice over the last several months on how to run it, and different thoughts and perspectives on that. So thanks for the call. Take care. Okay, now we're going to turn to some calls about Dungeon Crawl Classics. First, we'll have Carl Rodriguez, who is our, judge is the term we use for Game Master in DCC. And Carl Rodriguez of the GMologist Presents podcast. And then we'll hear from Daniel again in kind of response to Dungeon Crawl Classics and some of the rules and how it works.
Hey, BJ, I like your treatment or your summary of the rules for DCC. I should have you on, or I should have had you on to reprise that for my podcast. That would be kind of cool. I think you did a really good summary of it, and it might be fun to discuss at some point. DCC rules, how they differ from standard 3.5, because there are quite a few differences. The main thing to me that is attractive is just how magic works. I kind of dig it. It makes it more interesting than just Vancian Fire Forget type of spell casting that is atypical of D&D. So, and that holds not just for the cleric that you played, but also for wizardly spellcasters, which I think is cool.
Thanks, Carl. I had a lot of fun playing in both the first session and the second session, which I'm about to recap here in a few minutes. I'd love to. Feel free to use that sound clip, or if you want to bring me on and record a fresh one to kind of discuss the rules and compare and contrast, I'd be happy to do that. Anyway, thanks for the call, and I'll talk to you later.
Oh, see, having never played 3rd edition, I did not realize that's how the attacks work. That's super interesting that they kind of did that. And yeah, you pretty much explained the funky dice as far as I understand them as well. I think some other classes, I think like the warrior might get like a higher than a d20 as their action die eventually. And I know like the special situations, like if you are using a heavy weapon, like a two-handed weapon, you roll a d16 for initiative instead of a d20. That comes up fairly often. And also fumble dice are sometimes oddball dice. And your fumbles are based on the armor you're wearing, which I really like that in DCC. So, yeah, great explanation of the dice. But, yeah, I had to call in because I didn't know that 3rd edition did that, where your second attack got less of a bonus, and then it builds up. I actually kind of like that better than 5th edition, just giving you another attack. I know that that's simpler to do it that way, but I kind of like the second attack being slightly less than the first, at least at the beginning. Insofar as rolling dice, I know, obviously, because they did research, that you're right. Although they're also asking a certain audience that I would assume likes rolling dice. It's kind of funny, and I think that's one reason why the newer games tend towards more, I'm just going to say heroic or super heroic, however you want to say it, type characters, because players do want to roll the dice a lot more, especially in the more modern games. And when they roll the dice, they also want to succeed. Like, that's one of the ideas with bounded accuracy, was that you would succeed way more often than you failed, and then they inflated the hit points so that you could so things wouldn't be so swingy, right? Because they want people to roll dice. People want to roll dice a lot. So I don't disagree with that. And when I do my chainmail hack and you get to roll like 20 d6s all at once, oh yeah, it's a great feeling.
Hey Daniel, I didn't neglect to mention the fumble dice among other things. Right now, my character's crit die and fumble die are both a d12, so even if I get into those unique DCC situations, I'm not rolling a funky die yet. I think my second action, once I level up, will be a d16 for the action die. So, I like a lot of the DCC stuff. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I realize, it's certain pull the critical fumbles pull for again. I think Arrow kind of what put it back into a sword and sorcery genre, as opposed to the high fantasy you get in kind of at least contemporary D&D. But a lot of the mechanics, I think you could kind of tinker with them a little bit. I mean, if you even just eliminating. Well, I don't want to do it right now, but if you want to have more of a high fantasy style, but use the strengths of the DCC system, I think you might drop deity disfavor, and when a wizard casts and rolls a 1, the corruption influences and things like that. I mean, you don't see those things in D&D, but the fact that you still have to roll for a spell, the better the roll, the more powerful and the more. The spell works a little differently in your favor, or if you roll lower, you might fail, or the spell doesn't work quite as well. And then some of the way it uses dice to manage the action economy and people's bonuses and chances to hit, chances for success. I think all that stuff would work really well for high fantasy. Although I'm not advocating dropping any of that from dungeon crawl classes. I'm just starting to see the parallel in what works and how the different modules and components they're put in the system now that I get a chance to play it and have to think about running a character in it. So, but yeah, thanks for the calls, Daniel. Look forward to talking to you again in the future. And as I'm listening back through my responses to those calls, 2 things I neglected to mention. Carl mentioned the magic system, which I did kind of talk a little bit there in my response to Daniel. Yeah, I do like the DCC magic system. It definitely is a different paradigm from what you see in D&D. It gives you a different look. Where for those of you that may not be familiar with Dungeon Crawl Classics, clerics and wizards have to roll for a spell, and then I think for first level spells, usually you got to roll a 10 or higher. If you roll under a 10, then the spell fails. As the spell levels get higher, the threshold for what you have to roll to not fail goes up. And then if you roll a 1, there's kind of a disastrous event for a cleric. It means that for some reason you have offended your deity, and if you as a wizard, it means you've exposed yourself to some sort of corrupting arcane influence. You might develop some kind of mutation or disfigurement, or it could get potentially worse than that, I guess, depending on how bad you roll on the table. But it is a neat alternative to the Vancian system where you just your spells and you roll instead of you just knowing your spell and casting it. There's a chance that the spell doesn't go off, but on contrast to that, the spell just doesn't have one thing it does. It gets summed up in pretty short terms, like it does in D&D. There's a table that you roll on. It tells you whatever number and below, 10 below, 12 below, 15 below, whatever it is, fails. But then above that, every few increments of success, the spell becomes more powerful and has a much broader impact, which I think is really neat. And I think I may have mentioned this before, but I backed the Dungeon Crawl Classics box set for Dying Earth, which is they're having production right now. They just finished the Kickstarter recently. And I'm interested to see how they handle the Dying Earth, because Dying Earth is the source of Vancian magic. It's where the idea comes from, and so how are you going to plug that into a system that it's kind of D&D, but it is not using Vancian magic? I don't know what they'll do, but I guess we'll see once we get once it ships. And in response to what Daniel was saying about how they've sort of changed things in 5th edition, where you just get an extra attack, not at a lower attack bonus, and in some of the other ways, I think that's different approaches to the game. Some of it may be a matter of taste, but you're right on. Part of the reason that low level D&D heroes in 5th edition seem rather heroic compared to their ancestors in previous editions is because there's so much more that happens in the game, I think, is what's going on. One, there is the bounded accuracy. They want players to not always succeed, but to succeed more often than they fail. But also those added hit points allow you to do more with monsters. You can tack on special attacks, maneuvers, kind of big surprises, even in low-level things like kobolds and goblins, when you can rest assured that they're not going to just automatically result in a TPK. Like, I looked at importing some of that stuff into the campaign I'm running, because right now they primarily face, what have they faced? They've dealt with kobolds, goblins, hobgoblins, bugbears, and keep waving orcs out in front of under their noses, but they haven't gone after them yet. Which, the difference between those and BX is just they have the amount of hit points they have, and maybe slightly different armor classes. But they're basically just bags of hit points to engage in combat with, or you can role play with them, and they can set traps and use strategies and things like that, which I've tried to do. But if you try to graft on some of these later kind of modern D&D special tricks that each of them have, so that they don't all just play like the same bigger versions of the same monster that just have more hit points. When you try to do that with characters who themselves only have 2 or 3 hit points, I don't know if they can endure that. But when you beef them up a little bit like they do in 5th edition, between better armor and better hit points, they can endure. So they can get to see some of those, those monsters' bags of tricks play out at the table. At least I think that, if I remember correctly, that's part of why that design is there. But you're right. Yeah, they beefed them up with the more hit points in 5th edition. That was by choice to allow a different style of game than we see in BX. So, and as I'm about to get into a 5e recap, so I like both versions. They scratch different itches for me. Anyway, on to the next segment. Okay, Dungeon Crawl Classics. Saturday morning, I got to play in our second session of Dungeon Crawl Classics. This was ran by Carl Rodriguez, who you heard earlier. The GMologist Presents. I'm playing Bernfried, a cleric of Amontor, who is the god of mysteries and puzzles. So everything I do is kind of approached as a mystery to solve, a puzzle to sort out. The other players, we have Ardath, the warrior, who is played by Arlen Walker of the Live from Pelham's Wasteland YouTube and podcast. And then Otto the dwarf, who is played by another player who doesn't podcast or do anything on YouTube, so we will respect his autonomy. And then this time, Jason Connerly, who we heard at the top of the episode, was able to join us and introduce his character, Idris Khan, who refers to himself as a necromancer, so he's a wizard. So last time, Otto, Ardath, and Bernfried, we're fleeing from these marauders towards this mound. We're on this deserted kind of wasteland world that's part of a trinary star system. So we had explored a little bit of the mound and defeated a giant scorpion and some fire beetles, and discovered these portals to 3 other locations that may or may not be, maybe somewhere else in our world, maybe other world altogether, we don't know. But we decided to call it there. So as we're resting, as this episode opens up, when I'm on watch, we hear somebody calling from the outside, and it is Jason's character, Idris, who has explored the rest of the mound and has kind of found our location and is stating a concern. It's kind of hard to tell with the way Jason plays this character, if he's just BSing everybody, or if he's being completely sincere, or maybe somewhere in the middle. I don't know. You get the sense he's a little bit of a charlatan, but time will tell, I guess. Anyway, he's concerned about the condition of our beasts of burden, which I believe Otto the dwarf was riding a camel, and the other 2 of us had these large reptile-like creatures, which are kind of like the creatures Obi-Wan is riding in Revenge of the Sith, kind of the feathered lizard thing. So those were our mounts. Well, he's very concerned then because he found them abandoned in a cave, and that he's come and found us. And so he mentions he has tasted the scat of the creatures and found them to be in poor health and poor condition, and so he wants to offer his advice to us on how to better care for our animals. And because of he's kind of this wasteland survivor type of character. So after several mentions of sampling scat as a way to get information, Ardath, Arlen's character, just starts to refer to him as the shit eater, which I thought was pretty funny. Anyway, so yeah, Idris, we bring him into the camp. He doesn't seem to be a real danger to anybody. He's offering his services to help us explore the mound. And he is on a mission he's been informed by his patron. In Dungeon Crawl Classics, wizards are kind of like warlocks in later editions. They have patrons that may be otherworldly powerful entities that not quite maybe the same as the gods that clerics serve, but impart to them magical knowledge and guide them in their studies and their development of their magical power. Anyway, his patron has tasked him to destroy an altar that's at the top of the mound, which is dedicated to a rival entity that he considers to be profane. So we rest up. We continue to head up to the mound. We find one other side cave that we go into and discover a giant skeleton sitting on a giant throne with a great sword. And there are 4 other skeletons sitting kind of in lotus position around it. After several Conan jokes, given that we've come into a crypt with a huge guy with a huge sword on a throne. Ardath the warrior approaches, and he decides to just crush one of the ones sitting lotus style, kind of in supplication to the big one. And as he crushes its skull in with the butt of his sword, it kind of flinches, and then all the skeletons animate, and the battle is on. So I got pretty high on the initiative. I think I got first in the initiative order, so I cast Turn In Holy to turn undead and cause the 3 remaining human-sized skeletons to cower. It doesn't work on the giant skeleton. In fact, I tried it again the next round, and he still just shrugged it off. So at that point, Otto and Bernfried Otto and Ardath, the dwarf and the warrior, begin to just chip away at it, and I move up behind him, and it's punching pretty hard, and Otto is the first one to go after it. In fact, the wizard, Idris, played by Jason, cast Enlarge on him, so he was bigger, he was hitting harder, and he was giving out pretty good damage, but he kept taking a lot of damage from this thing. So my job as the cleric then is I kind of stand back out of reach of the thing's attacks and just keep him up as he kind of gets down to low hit points a couple times, but I'm able to heal him right back up to his full strength. Ardath, the warrior, after a couple of attempts with the maneuver, manages to disarm the thing and get its sword out from it, and which we later discover to be a magical greatsword. Magical Zweihander. We don't know the exact properties of it yet, but it should be a powerful tool for Ardath. Anyway, we finally defeat that skeleton, and then we mop up the other ones who've been cowering in the corner. And we ascend the top of the mound after that. We find this altar, and it is huge as it's starting to crack, and casting detect magic on it. Can tell there's magic kind of seeping out of it, but it's maybe not as powerful as it once was. But since this we're here, and in between Idris sort of being sent here to destroy this altar, and my character Bernfried recognizing this is probably an altar dedicated to a kind of entity of that we want to not it's probably better to get rid of it than to allow it to stick around. We decided we're going to go ahead and destroy it, but it's a big altar. It's too big. We think, well, we can't pick it up, we can't move it, we can't, we don't necessarily have. We'd take forever to just chip away of it. So the decision is made. Maybe we can roll it off and just let it tumble down the mound and crush open at the bottom. And so once again, Idris employs the enlarge spell, but he casts it in reverse to shrink it down. And the entity, actually, looking back through my notes here, was called, what was that thing called? Noyor, the color I cannot, Noyor of the color I cannot, the color that I cannot behold. That's a mouthful. Anyway, that's the entity that this altar is dedicated to. So we begin to try to shrink it down so we can maybe actually crack it a little bit and do a little damage and get rid of it. But as soon as that happens, this amorphous blob emerges from it. This sort of horrific looking, demonic, otherworldly, nasty looking thing. And we were going to wrap up there because we were about to run out of time and just pick up with that fight next time. And I said, can I get off one spell? So Carl said, yeah, we can do one spell and everybody can take one action and then we'll call it good. So I cast the spell Banishment, and I didn't roll high enough to completely banish it to the other, just banish it back to where it came from. But what happens when this spell manifests is these ethereal silvery chains sort of emerge and start to wrap around it and limit its movement. But where I rolled, again, I couldn't banish it all the way back. I didn't get any of the more powerful effects, but I got enough that it is not allowed to be within 60 feet of me. And when the spell goes off, if whatever you've sort of bound or attempted to banish is already 60 feet of them, it gets blown back 30 feet. So what happened was when this thing emerged from the altar, it kind of created this sort of this expulsion of force. And two of the characters, I can't remember which two of us stayed in place, but I know I think one of the warriors got thrown back. So, of course, I pick myself and dust myself off and see this thing and cast this spell. And because it's within 30 feet away from me, or it's less than 60 feet away from me, it immediately gets repelled 30 feet back, which now it's out over the in open air because I pushed it off the top of the mound. And so what Carl ruled was that the chains that bound it sort of popped up from the altar that it emerged for to try to drag it back in. And then when the force of the spell pushed it back into open air, that dragged the altar along behind it on the chain. And then like a weight, everything just dropped and plummeted to the desert floor below. And so we're not going to have to fight it when we come back next time. So that was a lot of fun. I appreciate everybody that joined in, and I think we had a pretty good. We had some good banter between the different characters, in kind of the downtime and kind of while we were exploring and things like that, and then had a couple of really exciting encounters with monsters. So I'm looking forward to playing again in a couple weeks, and that will wrap it up for Dungeon Crawl Classics. And I just finished listening to Carl's latest episode of the GMologist Present, and his recap is a lot more detail rich than mine. So go give it a listen. He talks a little more about the cosmology of the setting of the world we're on, and he does a little better job of explaining kind of how we got into the couple of different situations we got into, particularly with kind of the role that our new party member played by Jason Connerly had with what all went on. So you should always check out the GMology Presents. It's a great podcast, but in particular in regards to this summary, I think Carl gives some other details that'll be worth giving a listen. So that's his newest episode that just also, I think he published it 5 minutes before I published this one. So I'm adding this as an afterthought before I get too many listens, so you guys are directed over there. I'll put a link in my show description. I said I was going to do a 5e recap, but that one's going to be kind of lengthy. So I'm going to save that and do that on a separate episode and then publish that here in a day or two. Because it's not just a session recap, it's going to have to give the a year and a half's worth of summary to kind of get to what happened in the actual game session. So I think I'll put that together as a separate episode. I'm not going to go back and edit the opening, so I'll just leave it on a cliffhanger at that, and put a pin in this one. I'll put a pin in this conversation, in my own conversation with myself. That's a little bit of a running inside joke among the Anchor podcasters. So sorry to anybody that doesn't catch that, but hey, that's for Joe Richter and Daniel Norton and Jason Connerly and everybody else who's been a part of that conversation. All right, I am out of here. And that's it for this episode of The Arcane Alienist. I want to thank Dave Bone for the cover art that I use for the episodes. Check out ironseer.com. And the music is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. Thank you for listening. Give me a call sometime through the Anchor app or at the Anchor website. And I'll be back in the future with another episode.